usually watch this program, we don't take a stance usually on foreign policy. But it's interesting that you bring up Afghanistan. Afghanistan for a long time we were trying to mold into a, I guess you could argue, more secular country than it was when we arrived, fighting the Taliban for years.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. So this video is about a racist right-wing atheist, Atheist for Liberty, talking with Islamophobic whale who lied about her past and married a CIA agent, Al-Qaeda agent, and she participated in sex trafficking of boys, and she had to flee because she was caught, and she portrays herself as this refuge who was oppressed by evil Muslim men. So let's take a look at this video.
For those that usually watch this program, we don't take a stance usually on foreign policy. But it's interesting that you bring up Afghanistan. Afghanistan for a long time we were trying to mold into a, I guess you could argue, more secular country than it was when we arrived, fighting the Taliban.
So this atheist is talking about the occupation of Afghanistan, where the U.S. government tried to create a top-down revolution, social engineering. They tried to take a population of conservative, traditional, mostly Muslims in Afghanistan, and they tried to create them in their own image and turn them into secular liberals. So this was an act of, an example of Western imperialism, and specifically liberal imperialism, that happened in Afghanistan and that destroyed a lot of lives.
We pull out, the United States at least pulled out in August of 2021. Do you think that it was a mistake for the United States to pull out the way that it did, seeing that Afghanistan overnight turned into an Islamic theocracy, into Talibanistan overnight, immediately prohibiting women and girls from attending school, immediately disregarding all the work that we did to try to make Afghanistan a peaceful and more secular and enlightened place?
Afghanistan was already pretty peaceful, though, bro. It was pretty peaceful. You American imperialists invaded it and destroyed a lot of it, and because over some false neoconservative propaganda as well. You're not the one who made it a better place to live. And this is how these secular liberals are. A lot of their ideas aren't popular abroad, so they try to invade and destroy places in the name of spreading secular liberal enlightenment, so-called, but it's barbarity, it's anti-family values, it's atheism, it's secularism, it's just godless ideologies. Most of these people are atheists, they don't believe in God. A lot of them are neoconservatives, and they just want money. And this was after the communists invaded. So the communist Soviets, who were also atheists, they wanted to get rid of religion. They invaded and promoted their own imperialist agenda. And
do you think that we should have stayed, that there could have been a different plan? Because I know also right now we are supposed allies with the Taliban. I guess you could say they're the enemy of our enemy, since they're fighting ISIS also there. Do you think that it's, and this is, I guess, another follow-up question, do you think that it's a waste of time for us to be quote-unquote allies with these people, when even though they might be fighting a similar enemy to us, they still stand for the same dogmas?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a slightly different kind of terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference between the Taliban and ISIS. They're following very similar dogmas. They have slightly different ways of going about it.
So this woman is super stupid. America follows real politics. They don't, irrespective of the secular liberal militants within the government, the U.S. doesn't generally follow ideological alliances. At least they shouldn't. So she's comparing the Taliban to ISIS. They're not remotely similar in most ways. They're very different from each other. So, for example, the ISIS is an actual terrorist group. The Taliban isn't really as much of a terrorist group, at least not anymore. Their methodology has changed. They just want to consolidate Afghanistan. So it doesn't really make sense to compare the two. The reason she's comparing the two is mainly off of liberal ideologies. So, oh, they're both regressive. They're both religious organizations. They're both against feminism. This type of stuff. But and then she's using that as a focal point to compare these two. But that doesn't really work because the U.S. isn't looking at, oh, they have the same religion, therefore they're the same. It's not. They're not looking at it through this ideological perspective. They're looking at it through a practical point of view. So this woman is really stupid.
Is because of what you just identified there. We are allies with the Taliban. That's the problem. The problem was that even while we were there,
Bro, this whale is stupid. What is she saying? Like, what do you want? You want more war? You want $2 trillion more spent so a bunch of girls in Afghanistan can start an OnlyFans and learn about 800 genders? What is she talking about? What is she saying?
The work wasn't being done the way I think it should have been done, the way most enlightened, rational thinkers think it should have been done. For example, I'm sure you heard of situations like the bachabazi, which is something in Afghanistan. It's a systemic rape of little boys. And when the American soldiers would speak to their supervisors or their superiors about that, they were told not to say anything and not to intervene because it's their culture. And so it doesn't matter if they stayed there for 20 years. It doesn't matter if they stayed there for 200 years. If you're not doing the work of actually trying to enlighten this group of people, then you're not going to get anywhere. As long as you keep on saying it's their culture and we will ally with them, then I don't know how you expect any progress to happen. But we see the same thing happening here on our soil. You see, like, I think there's obviously a significant difference between how we're going to treat Afghans or Taliban even in Afghanistan versus how we would treat the exact same situation happening on Western soil.
Right.
But unfortunately, even here, we have the same appeasement. We see the same capitulation. We see the same tropes of it's their culture, it's their religion. We have to, accept it. And
so I totally agree with her. We have to challenge other cultures. So let's start with the West. The West has the highest rates of divorce. As you can see in this map, it's, all the red spaces, all the highest divorce rates are in the West. And then in the next picture, we see that the highest single parent households, typically single mother households, are also in the West. The West has, in some cases, 50% single mother households. So I think this is a barbaric culture and it needs to be criticized.
يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم تؤمنون بالله ورسوله وتجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون